Somewhere in eastern Ukraine right now, a Russian artillery commander is staring at a radio that just delivered the worst possible news. Not that his men are dead, not that his position has been found, that his ammunition is running low. Again. And this time, the supply point has no answer for him. They call it a delay. He knows what delay means. It means the operation headquarters just ordered him to execute doesn't get executed. And somewhere across that front line, a Ukrainian targeting team watching through drone feeds just noticed something. The Russian battery that was firing all morning has gone quiet. This isn't happening in one sector. It isn't happening in one region. It is happening across the entire front simultaneously. And the numbers that explain why are so significant that most mainstream analysts have not yet fully processed what they mean. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why the trajectory of this war just shifted, and why almost nobody is talking about it the right way. If this kind of deep analysis is what you're looking for, hit subscribe right now, because we update this every single day. Let's start with the number that changes everything. At the peak of Russian offensive operations in 2023 and into 2024, Russian forces were firing between 10,000 and 20,000 artillery rounds every single day across the front. That number was not just a statistic. It was the entire foundation of Russia's military strategy. Mass fires, overwhelming volume, suppress Ukrainian defensive lines, enable infantry to advance, and impose a casualty rate that Ukraine's manpower couldn't survive. That strategy required those numbers, and those numbers have collapsed. Current estimates from Ukrainian military intelligence, cross-referenced against open-source acoustic monitoring and frontline activity data, place Russian daily artillery expenditure at between 6,000 and 9,000 rounds per day. That is a 35 to 40% reduction. In a war where artillery is the single primary driver of tactical outcomes, a 35 to 40% reduction is not a data point. It is a strategic earthquake. And here is the second number that confirms this is not a temporary fluctuation. Russian territorial advance rates in the Donetsk region stood at approximately 30 square kilometers per month in the first quarter of 2025. In the most recent 30-day window, that number has dropped to 12 square kilometers per month. The artillery rate and the advance rate are telling the same story from two completely different angles. Russia's war machine is producing dramatically less output per unit of time than it was 6 months ago. Something caused this, and that something has a name. Keep watching, because what Ukraine has actually been doing to cause this is not what you think. The answer is not the front line. The answer is what Ukraine has been doing 600 kilometers behind it. Over the last several months, Ukraine has been running a sustained, systematic deep strike campaign against the specific nodes of the logistical network that connects Russia's production base to its frontline forces. Not random strikes, not opportunistic hits. A deliberate, sequenced, operationally logical campaign designed to strangle Russia's war machine from the inside. Here is the sequence. First, Ukraine targeted the ammunition transfer points, the specific facilities where shells move from major strategic storage onto the trucks that carry them to firing positions. In the last 6 weeks alone, Ukraine has struck more than 40 such facilities. Some were destroyed outright. Others were damaged enough to reduce throughput. Others were struck in ways that forced Russia to reroute supply through longer, slower, more expensive alternative paths. Each strike doesn't eliminate the ammunition. It adds time to the supply cycle. It creates bottlenecks that compound downstream. It is not a kill shot. It is slow suffocation. Second, Ukraine targeted fuel infrastructure. Russia's offensive operations run on diesel. For tanks, for artillery tractors, for the logistics trucks that move ammunition, for the maintenance vehicles that keep equipment running. Ukraine has struck 14 significant fuel storage facilities in the last month alone. Combined storage capacity destroyed or damaged is estimated in the hundreds of millions of liters. Third, Ukraine targeted railway infrastructure, the backbone of Russia's entire strategic logistics system. Not to destroy the railway entirely, but to create choke points, bottlenecks that reduce throughput across entire corridors. Every additional kilometer of transit distance adds time. Time adds cost. Cost adds pressure to a budget already hemorrhaging money. And here's the part that makes this campaign different from anything Ukraine has attempted before. Subscribe and stay with us daily because tomorrow we cover exactly how this targeting system was built. And the technology behind it is something no one saw coming. That technology is an AI-assisted multi-source intelligence fusion system that Ukraine has been quietly building for 3 years and is now operating at a level of sophistication that was not supposed to exist for a country of Ukraine's size and resources. Human analysts can review satellite imagery and identify a logistics facility. They do that reasonably well. What this AI system does is fundamentally different. It continuously correlates satellite imagery, signals intelligence, human intelligence, open source data, and the operational signature data collected by Ukraine's frontline drone swarms. It doesn't just find targets. It identifies when those targets are at maximum capacity, when they're receiving high-value cargo, when defensive posture around them has changed in ways suggesting reduced alert status. It finds targets at the moment they are most vulnerable, and it operates while human analysts sleep. While Ukrainian commanders are planning the next frontline operation, the system is processing, identifying, prioritizing, updating. This is how Ukraine has been able to strike 40-plus transfer points in 6 weeks. Not because Ukraine has unlimited strike assets, but because the targeting system is finding vulnerabilities faster than Russia can address them. And here is the feedback loop that makes the whole system self-improving. Every strike produces battle damage assessment data, imagery and signals intelligence collected after impact that feeds back into the targeting model. The system learns which facility layouts are most vulnerable, which defensive postures indicate reduced readiness, which strike approaches produce maximum disruption. Every engagement makes the system better at the next one. Ukraine is fighting Russia's war machine with an intelligence system that improves with every strike. Russia's war machine is degrading with every strike. That asymmetry is not a headline, it is the entire story. Now let's talk about the production problem because the strike campaign is the visible dimension of this crisis. The structural dimension is what is happening inside Russia's own factories. Russian artillery shell production, which peaked at estimated rates of 3 to 4 million shells per year in 2024, is now showing visible signs of constraint. The factories producing 152mm shells, the primary caliber of Russian field artillery, have been operating past their designed production limits for over 3 years. The machinery is degrading. Failure rates on production lines are increasing. Quality control problems from running equipment past service life are producing a percentage of shells that are simply substandard. And substandard shells don't just waste production capacity. They cause problems at the gun itself. Russian artillery crews have been reporting increased rates of premature detonations, misfires, and barrel erosion caused by shells with inconsistent propellant charges. Barrel erosion is specifically significant because artillery barrels wear out with use. They must be replaced at specific intervals. Replacement barrels require production capacity. That production capacity competes directly with ammunition production. Russia is caught in a maintenance and production competition it cannot win simultaneously at current operational tempo. Sanctions preventing access to Western-manufactured machine tools and precision components are making that competition harder to manage with every single month that passes. And Russia has also been importing artillery shells from North Korea, millions of them, documented and confirmed. Those shells supplement Russian domestic production. They partially offset disruption from Ukrainian strikes, but they are not of uniform quality. And the logistics of moving them from North Korea to Russian frontline units adds time and cost to a supply chain already under severe pressure. Every Russian adaptation to this crisis has a cost. The adaptations are real. They are not free. The human dimension of this crisis is the one that the data cannot fully capture, but that military historians are already noting as extraordinary. Ukrainian military estimates, cross-referenced with Western intelligence assessments, place Russian casualties since the beginning of the full-scale invasion at between 400,000 and 500,000 killed and wounded. At the lower end of that range, Russia has lost more soldiers killed and wounded in 3 years than the United States lost in Vietnam, Korea, and the Gulf War combined. Let that land. Each of those casualties represents a trained soldier removed from the order of battle. Russia has been replacing losses through mobilization, contract signing, and financial incentives that are extraordinary by Russian civilian wage standards. But the replacement soldiers of 2025 are not the soldiers of 2022. The 2022 force included career military personnel, contract soldiers with years of experience, NCOs with real combat competence. Many of those soldiers are now casualties. The 2025 replacement is a mobilized civilian who received weeks of training and was sent directly to the front. The tactical competence gap between a professional soldier and a mobilized civilian is enormous. And tactical competence is exactly what converts artillery shells and fuel into territorial gains. Russia is spending more shells to achieve less because the soldiers executing the operations are less capable than the soldiers who were executing them 3 years ago. Every additional ruble spent on soldier wages to sustain recruitment is a ruble not spent on the shell that soldier needs. Higher wages compete with ammunition costs, equipment maintenance costs, fuel costs, all inside a federal budget running a $60 billion quarterly deficit. This is not separate from the military crisis. It is the same crisis viewed from a different angle. On the front line itself, the effects of everything we have been describing are becoming measurable in the most direct possible way. Ukrainian soldiers in eastern Ukraine have been reporting something in recent weeks that they have not been able to report consistently for most of this war. Windows. Periods of time, hours, sometimes longer, during which Russian artillery fire drops below the constant threshold. When they can move, reposition, resupply, rotate tired units, do the things that are simply impossible when Russian artillery is firing at maximum rate continuously. These windows are not safe. Russian artillery is still active. Ukrainian forces are still taking casualties. But the character of the environment has changed. The constant, oppressive weight of Russian mass fires that defined the operational environment in the Donetsk region for most of 2023 and 2024 has lightened. Not disappeared, lightened. And lightened means windows. Ukrainian drone operations have also been more effective in specific sectors. Not because Ukrainian drones improved dramatically, but because the Russian electronic warfare coverage that was suppressing Ukrainian drone effectiveness has been thinning. The maintenance crisis hitting Russian electronic warfare platforms, combined with Ukrainian strikes on EW maintenance facilities, has created gaps in the jamming coverage. Ukrainian drone operators can feel those gaps. Success rates have increased. More drones are reaching Russian positions. More accurate ISR is supporting Ukrainian fires. The effects that started in the deep rear, the logistics disruption, the production constraints, the maintenance crisis, are showing up in the lived experience of soldiers on both sides of the line. Here is the piece that adds urgency to everything. Time. Russia is running out of margin. The combination of production constraints, logistics disruption, maintenance degradation, and economic pressure is creating a trajectory that is moving in Ukraine's direction. But trajectories take time to produce their outcomes, and time has political dimensions the military picture alone does not capture. In Washington, conversations are ongoing about Ukraine aid timelines, about the sustainability of long-term support, about what a negotiated outcome looks like. In Moscow, there are conversations about what the budget can actually sustain, about whether economic deterioration is approaching the threshold where domestic political stability becomes a concern, about whether the military situation has deteriorated enough to justify a negotiated exit that can be framed domestically as something other than defeat. In Kyiv, military command is making decisions about when and where to exploit the windows the deep strike campaign is creating, how to time the transition from shaping to exploitation before any negotiation framework closes that window permanently. All three conversations are time-sensitive. The Russian war machine is degrading. The degradation is real and measurable. The trajectory is in Ukraine's favor. But the trajectory reaches its outcome faster if Ukraine can sustain and accelerate the campaign producing it. The clock is running, not against Ukraine, against Russia's ability to reconstitute before the degradation becomes irreversible. So what does it actually look like when a war machine gets torn apart? It does not look like a single dramatic collapse. It does not look like a surrender on the front page. It looks exactly like what we have been describing. Artillery rates that decline 35 to 40% over 6 months. Not zero, 35 to 40. Advance rates that drop from 30 square kilometers per month to 12. Not zero, 12. Equipment availability falling below designed operational levels. Not total breakdown, constrained. Windows in the artillery fire that weren't there before. Not silence, windows. Electronic warfare coverage thinning in specific sectors. Not gone, thinner. Supply deliveries arriving with delays instead of on schedule. Not never, delayed. Each individual indicator looks like a manageable problem. Combined, sustained, compounding over months, they add up to a war machine producing less output from the same inputs, achieving less with more, running at reduced efficiency in a war where efficiency is everything. Russia's war machine is not broken. It is being broken, systematically, deliberately, through a campaign that attacks the specific mechanisms of military effectiveness rather than confronting them head-on. Ukraine learned something in 3 years of fighting a larger, better-resourced adversary. You do not beat a war machine by fighting it on its own terms. You beat it by targeting the things the war machine depends on: the ammunition, the fuel, the maintenance, the components, the production capacity, the economic foundation, simultaneously, from every angle, without stopping. Russia built a war machine for a conventional conflict it expected to win in weeks. It is now discovering what happens when that machine meets an adversary that has become expert at tearing machines apart. And the tearing is not finished. If you want to understand what comes next, the specific sectors where Ukraine is preparing to exploit the degradation it has created, and whether the political window in Washington stays open long enough for that to matter, we cover that analysis every single day. Drop your biggest question about this conflict in the comments right now. We read every one. Share this video with one person who still doesn't understand why this war is not at a stalemate, because the numbers say something very different. And if this is the level of analysis you want delivered to you daily, not weekly, not occasionally, subscribe. There is no algorithm trick here, just the most important military and geopolitical story of our time, broken down clearly every day. We will see you tomorrow.